Hello and welcome to another episode of the Moderately Proficient Plant Guy. My name is Rob Melanson. Today we're going to talk a little bit about propagation. I'm going to show you how to propagate some of the Sonerilla and some of the other soft, what I call soft stemmed plants. Some of these would include anything in the family Melastemaceae. They're often called melastomes, Sonerilla being one of those. So we're going to look at propagating Sonerilla and some Aragostemas. First, we'll take a cutting from a Sonerilla plant, and this will be what is considered a stem cutting. They probably will work from leaf cuttings as well, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. So first, we're going to take a healthy, full Sonerilla like this, and we're going to find a stem that we can take out that doesn't necessarily wreck the look of the whole plant. First of all, you always want to sterilize your equipment. I usually spray my tools with a little alcohol to get off any potential bacteria or virus or anything else that taken from cutting on another plant. You don't want to transfer that to the new plant by using the same tool. So you sterilize your tools, and we're going to take a plant like this and we're going to find a stem. This is a good option. So we're going to find one of the ones at the base of the plant. Doesn't really matter where, but we're going to take one that doesn't really affect the look, because you still want the mother plant to look kind of full. We're going to take this and we're just going to cut the stem here, and so this is what we're left with. And you don't want to cut it all the way to the base. You don't want to have a giant stem. So I mean, a few inches, and this is actually an inch. That's plenty. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this. I found that you don't really need rooting hormone. If you want, you can wet the end of this and dip it in rooting hormone before you put it in the moss. I'm going to use sphagnum moss in one of these little basket pots. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to put the cutting with the moss in this container, and then I'm going to place this into a terrarium that holds about an inch of water on the bottom until the roots form. And I'll show you that. So we're going to take our bit of sphagnum moss here, and I'm basically going to just wrap it around the stem fairly tight. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick that into this little basket. Like I say, it doesn't need to be really tight. You want it to, this moss is going to basically stay moist, and that'll allow the roots to grow from here. And then as soon as you start seeing roots coming out of the basket, then you can either plant it in a tropical mix, or depending on where you're going to grow it, you can just plant it in straight sphagnum or put it in a terrarium or whatever. So once I have the plant in its little container, these are those Exoterra, I believe it's 18 by 18 by 24. And I have a misting system attached that comes on a couple times a day, and then you've got a little bit of water, standing water at the bottom. I just place that right in there, and that allows it to keep the moss moist, and it will grow roots from there. And as soon as it is started rooting, you'll see the roots coming out the bottom, and I can show you that. So unfortunately, I do not have a Sonerilla that is in the basket growing roots, but I do have a begonia, and I can show you. You can see the roots there. This is what it's going to look like. You'll have the roots shooting out of the basket, and at that point you can go ahead and pull the plantlet from the basket and put it into a larger pot. The next thing I'll show you is leaf cuttings from Aragostema. I will show you two different methods. I have not propagated these yet, so I wanted to try different methods. So the first method is using sphagnum moss, and the second method is using a mixture of perlite, vermiculite, and I believe maybe some sand. So the first method was basically using sphagnum moss in these little plastic containers. And you basically take a leaf and place the base of it in the sphagnum moss. Now there's different ways to do this, and based on the way don't know if you can see this guy here. You see how the roots are coming out of the vein? And you'll see the little plantlets coming out of the backside. That tells me that it would have been better to slice the veins in the leaf and lay it flat. And that's a typical way that you do begonias, is you take the begonia leaf and you make little slices along the veins, and then you place it flat down on sphagnum or some other cutting media, and it'll grow from there. These are different types of argostema, and I believe a ginger. And the ginger clearly does not root well from a cutting. That's pretty much a dead leaf at this point. But the argostemas, you can see that and these, I'm going to leave them in here some longer because they really need some more time. But there's roots in all of these, and as soon as you start seeing the plants form like this, see on the back of this one, I would let it grow a little bit larger and get larger leaves and then a larger amount of the roots, and then I would pot it in a different pot. So this is with the sphagnum, and this is with perlite and vermiculite. And both about equal success. Again, this is a ginger that did not obviously work. So these aragostemas, though, they all are growing roots. Like I said, they need more time, but you can see there's roots. I don't know if you can see that on the surface. Let's see if I can get a better shot of this. You can see on, I don't know if you can see on the surface, but there's roots running along the surface. So that tells me that they are on their way to becoming a little plantlet. Based on the reaction of this other one, where you had the roots coming from the vein, I would actually do this a little different next time. I would slice the veins like I would a begonia leaf, place them flat on the soil, and I'll show you one of the begonia leaves, how that's done. So this is Begonia pavonina, and you can see, I'm surprised just the one at the base of the node is the only one that's coming up. Usually you'll have little plantlets all along these other slices. I can see the roots forming there. There, those are roots. So that's going to be another little plantlet there. And these rocks are basically just holding the leaf down flat because it needs contact with the media in order to start the process. But you basically, like you can see, I sliced all along the veins there, and maybe I didn't get through to the vein, or maybe it's not got enough contact. You would see, usually you'll see plantlets forming from each of those cuts. And I think they might not be touching there. It could be that it's not moist enough. That's pretty much what you get. Now I would let that grow quite a bit more before I separate it. Actually, this is just vermiculite. But you can experiment with different things and see what works for you. So next, I'll show you, when I was putting back one of those containers, I broke off a piece of a jewel orchid. This is an Ectochilus roxburghii, and I believe it's a hybrid cross with something else. When I was putting back one of those containers, I accidentally hit the plant and knocked off a piece. So I'm going to go ahead and propagate this guy. What you're going to look for in these jewel orchids is these little nubs right at the nodes, and this goes for a lot of plants. You'll see the roots or growth points coming out of where previous leaf node is. So you can see these little nubs there. That's going to be where the roots are going to grow. So I'm just going to take that. I have a pot with just sphagnum moss, and I'm just going to set it down in the moss. Now, all you want is contact. I don't want to smother it with moss. I just need it to sit on the top there. I might get a rock or something just to keep it in place so it doesn't fall over when the mister comes on. I'm going to take that, and this is going to go right into one of these terrariums because you want a lot of humidity. Now, it could be, again, it really depends on the plant and your situations. This is a very humid room that I am in. The humidity stays in the 90s typically all year. So I probably wouldn't even need to put it in one of these terrariums. However, the moss will eventually dry out, and you want to keep that moss moist. You don't want it sopping wet, but you want to keep it moist. Depends on your conditions where you would put this to propagate. But that's basically it. You just set it on the moss and keep the moss moist, and those roots will start to grow and support the plant. When it first comes off, like I say, until it grows roots, it needs moisture for the leaves. They're gonna transpire and lose water. Since it doesn't have any roots yet, it's relying on the moisture in the air to keep the leaves turgid. That's pretty much it for the jewel orchid. And the last one I'm gonna show you is a monstera, and this would apply to any of your philodendrons, your monsteras, and lots of other plants, but this is going to be a Monstera dubia. So first I'll show you typically where I would take a cutting. So this is a dubia that's growing up this pole here, and the dubia has the really nice variegated leaves when it's in the juvenile form of the leaf. Well, you can kind of see them there. But then once it goes and hits more light and at the top of the tree, the leaves start turning into the mature form. Not as much variegation. Still has a little bit. And then they'll start getting the fenestration on the leaves. So this, I could make many cuttings out of this if I wanted to, but you're basically going to take, you can see where at each of the nodes, you've got these aerial roots starting to come out at each step of the way. So those will grow these long aerial roots, and this one goes all the way down to the ground. You're going to take these, you'll take a cutting, like for instance I would take probably, if I wanted to use this piece, it's got new growth on the end, I would typically take 1 or 2 leaves, maybe 3. So let's say I would take this with 2 leaves, I would cut it right here in between these 2 nodes, and then I would take this piece and put it in moist sphagnum. I've done that maybe a month ago with another piece, and I will show you that. So this is a piece I took, I'm going to say probably a month or maybe more. Probably going on 2 months. But I took 3 leaves, very similar to what I just showed you. And you see at each, you've got these aerial roots that come out. This is just straight sphagnum moss, and I kept it pretty much moist. I did not keep it in a terrarium. I just kept it in the room and just kept this moist, not wet. And then you can see all the roots that it has grown here. And once those roots get going, it'll start putting out new growth at the end. You can see there, the focus. And at this point, I would take this and I would take it out of this sphagnum and pot it up in whatever I wanted. Again, it depends on where you put it. If I was putting this inside, I would have a mix that retained more moisture than in here. In this room, and like I say, it's very humid already, so I don't need, I would use a very porous mix that drained quickly. In an indoor situation, I would probably use a different mix that maybe would hold a little more moisture. I would take it out of here, trying not to destroy the entire root system, but if you lose a few roots, that's fine. But you basically, I would take this, clean off this old sphagnum. If there's some left on there, that's perfectly fine. It'll degrade in the material, in the media eventually. And I would go ahead and pot it up, and there you have a new plant. Again, that applies for Monstera and any vining philodendron Monstera type. So this is a philodendron Burl Marx Fantasy that I can show you. You see the roots. You can see the roots coming out of each of the nodes. So again, I would typically, in this case, I had all these leaves, and I just laid it in this terrarium where it's got pretty much standing water at the bottom, and you can see all the roots that it has formed. You don't need to necessarily do this in a terrarium, but The Burrow Marks Fantasy I know does really well in that situation. So that'll do it for this episode. Let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions for videos you want me to make. Please, if you liked this video, if you like these series, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications if you want to be notified when I make a new video. My name is Rob Melanson. I will see you next time.